3:40 at night, and I was trying to do this about around 3 o'clock, and it didn't work out the way I wanted to. That's okay. And the title, as you can see, is "Why English is So Important." Um, well, in the 1600s, two factions came together under King James the First of England, King James the Sixth of Scotland, and in that faction were Anglicans, yep, and Puritans, and I think that's what it was. And they didn't like each other too much, and it was by the efforts of John Reynolds and others, and of course the king himself, that got the groups to work together. And next thing we know, 7, 8 years later, we have the authorized version because they came together. And they split into three groups, of course, and they were in three places. And they might not like it to one another, but they all agreed that the Bible had to be understandable for all those people to have in their own hands, evidently. So that's what happened. That was the end result. And it's been a blessing ever since. And also, because of that blessing, we, as a nation, came together and formed, of course, beforehand, the Declaration of Independence as a entity of ourselves, or a nation of ourselves, that we're not going to be following any more of the desires of the King of England and say, hey, you push this around long enough, you're a tyrant, and that's enough. We're going to form our own nation, And of course, they had a fight for independence. They won it. We won our independence. Our ancestors did, more or less. But anyway, and then years later, not too many years, um, the Constitutional Convention was made up, and in the 1780s, 1788. And of course, they all came together. All the states ratified, well, most all the states had to be 9 states ratified, came together for the common good, and formed the United States Constitution. First, the Constitution was the Bill of Rights. First 10 of them. Actually, there were 12, but they only ratified 10. So anyway, came together for that. So what does that tell you about English? What does that tell you about the English language? It's a very important language. It's a very pure language. It was formed and came to its peak in the 1600s. And God used Hebrew and He used Greek, and then eventually it came down to English. Now, I want to read you something out of the Bible here, and also something that Sam Gipru, which I think is very important. If you go to Zephaniah 3:9, of course, I think there's other things that Joel says about it, and I'm with stammering lips and my people, something other, I forget what it was in scripture. But anyway, Zephaniah 3:9 kind of hits it for me on the head. If you look at it, it says, "For then I will turn to the people a pure language, that they may all call upon the name of the Lord to serve Him with one consent." I will turn to the people a pure language, that they might all call on the name of the Lord with one consent. And that's what's so very important, to call upon the name of the Lord in one consent. Everybody together. I believe that's what they did whenever they came together with the authorized version. I believe it's what they did whenever they came together with, the Declaration of Independence, the United States Constitution, and many other documents. But more or less, they were, in this case, they were English documents. That is, they're the English language. And we see how English was all around the world. And, it's everywhere around the world. But anyway, let me read it one more time for you in Zephaniah 3:9. "For then will I turn to the people a pure language, that they may all call upon the name of the Lord to serve Him with one consent." That makes a lot of sense. So, therefore, whether that's Hebrew or Greek or whatever, we can apply that same thing to English today. That we will all call upon the name of the Lord and will consent. Again, the language of English is all over the world. We all call upon the name of the Lord to serve Him and one consent as Christians. That shows us right there how important English is. It shows us that English is that very same language that has been developing into, it has developed, and it's so important because, like I said, it's everywhere. And this is what Sam Gipp says about it. I have to try to read this with one hand, but anyway, getting sleepy. Whew. Excuse me. Um, it says, is there a perfect Bible in English? Doesn't there also have to be a perfect Bible in French and German and Japanese, etc.? No, God has always given His word to one people in one language to do one job, to convert the world. The supposition that there must be a perfect translation in every language is erroneous and inconsistent with God's proven practice. This explanation comes in three parts: the Old Testament, the New Testament, and the Bible. The Old Testament is an accepted fact that, when the exception of some portions of Ezra and Daniel, the Old Testament was written in Hebrew. It is also accepted that it was divinely given to the Jews. Thus, God initiates His pattern of operation. He gave His word to one people in only one language. God, apparently unintimidated by modern scholarship, did not feel obligated to supply His words in Egyptian, Chaldean, Syrian, Ethiopian, or any other of the languages in use on the earth at the time of the Old Testament. That the time the Old Testament was written, the Old Testament was given exclusively to the Jews. Anyone desiring the Word of God would have to convert to Judaism. Ample provision was made for such occurrences. New Testament, it is also accept the fact that the New Testament was written in Greek, Koine to be exact. Again, the Lord apparently saw no reason to inspire a perfect original in all of the language of the world extant at that time. Okay, and that's so understandable, really, if you look at it. Judaism first, I mean, the Jewish language, Hebrew, those people, then Greek, and then English. They all have specific areas of coverage. And now look at English today. Look how much area it covers. Okay. It said only this time, instead of giving His book to nations such as Israel, He simply gave it to the Christians who were told to go out and convert the world. Matthew 28:19. His choice of Greek as the language of the New Testament was obvious in that it was the predominant language of the world at that time. The entire Bible. It is obvious that God now needed to get both His Old Testament and His New Testament welded together in a language that was common to the world. Only English can be considered such a language. It is. The English language had been developing for many centuries until the late 16th century. About that time, it finally reached a state of excellence that no language on earth has ever attained. And it's pretty odd, isn't it, that the English version of the Bible, the authorized version of the Bible, has been around longer than any Bible has ever been, you know. And then you got the United States Constitution, that is the oldest constitutional document in the world today. and people base their constitutions off of it. Isn't that something? Okay. The English language has been developing for many centuries until the late 16th century. By the time it finally reached a state of excellence that no language on earth has ever attained, reading this over again, it would seem that God did the rest. He chose this perfect language for the consummation of his perfect book. First England and later the United States swept the globe as the most powerful nations on earth, establishing English in all corners of the globe as either a primary or a secondary language. Today, languages who do not speak English must still teach English to many of their citizens. Even nations antagonistic to the West, such as Russia and Red China, must teach English to their businesses and to their business and military personnel. Thus, in choosing English in which to combine his two testaments, God chose the only language which the world would know, just as he has shown in his choosing only one language for the Old Testament and only one language for the New Testament. He continued that practice by combining those two testaments in only one language. But let us not forget the fact, by choosing the English language, God has given us a mandate to carry out the Great Commission. He did not give us a perfect Bible to sit placidly on the coffee table in our living room to let our guests know that we are religious. He did not give it to press a flower from our first date or to have a record of our family history. Family tree, actually. He gave it to us to read and to tuck under our arm and share with a lost world the good news of Jesus' payment for sin that is found inside. Let's get busy. Okay, so there you go. This is a shorter video. And if you got some considerations, questions, whatever, check out Sam Good's book, The Answers Book, a help book for Christians. Good stuff. Great material in here about the Authorized Version Bible. And a lot of questions to be answered. So check it out for yourself. A lot of scriptural answers too. So anyway, just wanted to point that out real quick. And I just want to read this one more time. In Zephaniah 3:9. For then I will turn to the people a pure language, that they may all call upon the name of the Lord to serve him with one consent. And there, just imagine, I mean, even though Israel, they speak Hebrew, they're really good at speaking English. Even though the rest of the world is really good at speaking their own particular languages, you can get on Twitter, you can get on Instagram, and you can talk to somebody in English, and they understand what you're saying. Plus, they can understand, they talk their own language as well. I mean, I've had that encounter with several people in several countries I've talked to, on Instagram. They understand English very well. So that proves the point right there, that God uses one language to get his word out. So let's get busy. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it's done something for you. I hope it blesses you. And I ask the Lord bless you and give you peace, give you understanding, and give you the knowledge of his word in his perfect word, which is in English. God bless and take care. See you later.